Welcome back. Day 2 Mexican War. Um, Guys, this has been a tough, long week of learning about Texas and all these different territories becoming states and the Mexican War. It's a lot. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over yesterday's lesson and then I'm going to show you guys what to do for today. But then I'm going to actually take you through the need to knows for the week just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So this might be a little bit longer of a video. If you feel like you don't need to listen to the need to knows at the end, that's fine. But I think it's going to be important for you to stay tuned for that because those are the things you really need to know based on what we've talked about this whole week. So without further ado, as always, let's check out the review questions from yesterday. All right, so we talked about California. How did they get their independence? The same way Texas did. They fought for their independence for Mexico and they won. Then, how did Texas get their independence? Just a quick reminder. Remember, they fought Mexico for their independence. It was a struggle, but they eventually won their independence. However, Mexico was not happy about this. And then number 3, how did Texas become a state? Eventually, actually 9 years later, it would become annexed by the U.S. And if we don't remember what annex means, that just means to add. So U.S. adds Texas to the United States 9 years later. Now remember, this took such a long time because people were worried because it was another slave state, so it would throw off the balance, and they were worried about the war possibilities with Mexico, which, as we know, happened. So quickly, let's just look up here. So California is a part of Mexico as well. Once they declared their independence, that's also going to add to some tension between the U.S. and Mexico. Moving on down here. So there was this trail called the Santa Fe Trail, which was used by Americans, similarly as the Oregon Trail. Basically, we were trading using that trail, and while we're trading, going along this trail, people start settling. So now we have Americans settling onto this new land that once was a part of Mexico. As you can see, it goes right through this area claimed by Mexico. So Americans are settling here. So that's also going to make Mexico mad. And that's basically what we talk about here in this right pair share. So California being annexed, or not annexed, sorry. California becoming a territory, Santa Fe Trail and American settlers in Mexican land, and the manifest destiny, this desire for us to move west, are all going to cause tension between the United States and Mexico. So the relationship is tense. And then, to put the cherry on top, Texas is finally annexed. Now, when we officially make Texas a part of the United States, this puts Mexico over the edge, leading into Mexico War. So that's kind of the causes of the Mexican War. Today we're going to talk about the effects. So quick review already happened here. Moving on down to day 2. So day 2, what you're going to hit today is the actual start of this war, what happens throughout the war, who wins the war, and what happens as a result of the war. So document 1 is about fighting breaking out. You're going to kind of follow this map. I know this is really small, so if you guys need to make this bigger, you can just click on it, make it bigger. That's fine. Okay, good. Moving on down. Then we're going to talk about the Mexican cession. Okay, so basically what's going to happen at the end of the war, Mexico is going to cede their land to the U.S., and if you remember from last unit, the word cede means to give up. So Mexico is giving up their land to the United States. So that's kind of a hint as who's going to win. And that Mexican cession, that land given up to the U.S., is located right here, this pink area. Notice there's another little thing down here called the Gadsden Purchase. You're not going to explicitly learn about that right here, but you do need to know where that is and what it is. Basically, about 5 or 6 years later, after the war ends, the U.S. purchases this land from Mexico. Okay, so that's today. Only 2 documents to do. And a quick little review question. Monday, we're going to review the Mexican War even further. So if you're still confused about Mexican War after today, no worries. Monday we'll hit it again. But as I mentioned, this is Friday, so I want to make sure we go through all the need to knows that you should have for the week. So I'm going to switch tabs here quickly. Okay, so just like last week, I have this separate page which I'm going to post onto into the Schoology course after I give you guys time to. It's on there. You'll see it on there. Okay. So week 2, need to knows. Number 1, how did the United States obtain Florida? We know that we got it through the Adams-Onis Treaty, bought it from Spain, and eventually we annexed it as a slave state. Remember, annex means to add on, so the U.S. adds that onto their states. 2, what is the story of how Texas gained its independence and later becomes a state? Remember, we have Americans moving on into Texas with that land grant. Eventually, we outnumber the Mexicans, and Texans/Tejanos decide it's time to fight for independence from Mexico. They lose at the Alamo, but we use that to pump us up. We win at San Jacinto. We gain the independence, and then eventually annexed by the U.S. 9 years later. 3, explain how the Alamo inspired Texans to fight. Okay, so remember, we got smoked at the Alamo. However, we don't dwell on this. We actually lost a lot of guys, and in their honor, we kind of use this as inspiration to continue fighting, motivation to win at San Jacinto. People remember Texans were screaming, "Remember the Alamo," to remember to kind of ignite that fire to help them win at San Jacinto. Number 4, why did Northerners oppose annexing Texas? Remember, Texas was going to be annexed as a slave state. Remember, there was this desire to have a balance between free states and slave states. And the reason they wanted that balance is that slave state supporters didn't get all the power, / free states didn't get all the power. They wanted to maintain this balance. Finally, number 5, what were the causes and effects of the Mexican War? You're going to talk a lot more about this on Monday, but the causes are going to be manifest destiny being a big one, because remember, the U.S. wants to expand west and Mexico kind of gets in our way. So this hurts our relationship with Mexico, causes tension. Texas being annexed, remember that was a big one that upset Mexico. Border disagreements and then growing tension is going to ultimately cause the Mexican War to happen. And then the effects, the U.S. wins, we gain a bunch of land. The Mexican Cession, which again was that land that Mexico gave up to the U.S., which will include California, Texas, and a bunch of other present-day states. Let's move into some key vocab you guys should know from this week. The Northwest Ordinance, that was that thing that kind of said whether or not you could be a territory or not. So in order to become a territory, you had to have 60,000 people and an appointed governor. The Alamo was that place where the Texans took an L, but also inspired them to continue fighting and eventually win. To cede means to give up. So when Mexico ceded their land to America, they gave up their land to America. Annex means to take or to add. So when the U.S. annexed Florida and Texas, they added them to the country. The Mexican War was the war between the U.S. and Mexico, which was basically disputes over land. Mexican Cession was the land that Mexico ceded or gave up to the U.S. after the war, and the Gadsden Purchase, a portion of land that the U.S. bought from Mexico 6 years after the war. And then let's quickly locate those items on this map. So which letter represents Louisiana Purchase? That's C. Here's the Louisiana Purchase. Oregon is A, up here in the Northwest. Texas is B, down here, this huge portion of land here. And then the Mexican Cession is D, which includes California, parts of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, all those states. And then which letter represents Gadsden Purchase? That would be letter E, this tiny little piece of land that was once Mexico, now U.S., down here. All right, so there's your review for the week. Again, this document that I'm on right here will be posted in Schoology, so if you guys want to take a look at that for studying or to review, you may. And remember, your task today is to complete in the packet Mexican War Day 2, 2 documents, and then make sure you complete the discussion if you have one. All right, if you have any questions, let us know.